Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I just wanted to welcome you all on behalf of the Public Guardian and Trustee of BC to this event as one of the collaborators for this event with many of our esteemed colleagues. So welcome. My name is Alison Leaney, and I am the Provincial Coordinator for Vulnerable Adults and Community Response at the Public Guardian and Trustee. And Dan and I just mentioned we hadn't seen each other for quite some time, but we've been on this path. Well, I've been on this guardianship path with Kimberly for 18 years. Anyway, so...
Myself, not me.
Oh, you haven't been? Oh, age myself. Okay, I'll just do it to myself. But I know there's a lot of people in this room I've known for a very long time, but okay, I won't do the numbers. Anyway, so welcome to all of you. The second session of the day is entitled Theft and Financial Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation in Institutional Settings. And the panel is going to begin with Kimberly, who's going to speak, as you can see, about gifting in institutional settings. And then we're going to turn it over to Dan, who's going to talk specifically about theft, from what I understand. And then we're going to turn it over to Charmaine to kind of pull out some additional themes, pull things together a bit, and then turn it over to you sometime between 11:45 and 12 o'clock to have the same kind of interactive, enlightening discussion we had in the first session. So over to you, Kimberly.
Well, thank you, Alison, and thank you to Gloria for inviting me to this year's Friesen conference. This is a long, deep room. Hopefully everyone can hear right to the back. As Alison mentioned, the topic for our panel presentation is theft, financial abuse, neglect in institutional settings. It's quite a broad subject. As I was told that I only had 15 to 20 minutes, I narrowed it down to one topic that I thought a lot of people don't know a lot about, and that's gifting in care facilities. So I was just going to cover what the law is, what the role of the Public Guardian and Trustees office is, the office I'm with, some of the things we've seen, and some recommendations. First, before I start, I would like to say that I chose gifting because it's an element that I do have concerns about. Certainly not all gifting is abuse or exploitation, but I think you can always say that it is conflict of interest and has to be looked at carefully and understood well. We do have law that supports the principle of restricting gifting in care facilities. It's been with us a long time. Right now, the main core piece of legislation is the Community Care and Assisted Living Act, but that was predicated by the Community Care Facility Act, and much of the same language and principles were embedded in there as well. So this has been with us for quite a period of time. It definitely has the benefit of setting these principles in law. And, next slide. Basically, who is restricted from receiving gifts? The legislation lays out that it's the licensee, the agent, or employee. An employee is further defined as volunteers as well. And it also includes any relatives or friends of those individuals. So it's quite broad in its scope. And the focus is that any of these people must not persuade or induce an adult to change their will, make a bequest in their will, or to give a gift. But they don't define gift any further than that. So what is restricted is a gift, a bequest, or a benefit. And I'll get into a benefit later. But so anything that would be the natural conflict of interest that you or your friends or your family are getting a benefit through your knowledge and involvement with a person who resides in a care facility. And those are, basically they don't say that you're prohibited to give them, it just says that the gift is invalid. And unless the PGT gives written consent. So that's where our office comes in. And I should add that there's a parallel provision that was added in 2010 in the Hospital Act to cover care facilities under that act, not the acute hospitals themselves, but the similar type of residential care facilities. And I added the definitions here because on first reading you'd think that the gifting restrictions applied across the board to the community care facilities as well as assisted living, but closer reading of the definition shows that assisted living is actually exempt. And that's been an area that I've had some concerns about over the years. So, the limitations of for all that I'm saying, first of all, it's great to have law there. It's great to know that there's law that says that gifting can be considered inappropriate. It needs to have very sophisticated review and approval process through our office, but there are limitations. It is a bit toothless. It basically just says that the gift itself is invalid, so anyone trying to rectify or remedy a gift given would actually probably have to take legal action to do that, which could be costly. The other limitations is that it still only applies to a narrow range. It's still great. It covers all the residential care facilities, but it doesn't cover assisted living, where I would argue people are even more vulnerable. It doesn't cover facilities under the Mental Health Act, doesn't cover acute care hospitals, and it doesn't apply to those facilities that are for two or fewer people or other types of care arrangements in the community, which I think is a real hidden area as well, but probably a topic for another presentation. Gift is not defined, which makes it a little bit gray. And whenever there's gray, there's things that can go sideways. Approval of a gift to our office is usually something of a substantive nature that's been left in a will, but really the term gift can apply quite broadly. You could take it down to a box of chocolates, although I presume that's more covered by policy within a facility. But when do you draw the line, and when do you say this is something that would require an approval? There's also been some discussion, although I think it's a bit of an oxymoron myself, but nonetheless, the language of the Act where it says that you should not induce or persuade someone to give a gift or a benefit, and if it's a gift of that nature, then it comes to our office for approval. But I mean, what would we be looking for other than inducement, persuasion, or capacity? So I've had the argument that if they didn't do anything to induce or persuade, then it didn't require a consent. I'd say that's real dangerous territory to be on, but nonetheless, the language of the Act is a little bit gray and could be clearer. The restrictions also don't apply to foundations that are built up to support facilities, and that's sometimes been raised as an issue. And the spirit of the legislation, the idea that we shouldn't have gifting, is very, very dependent on education and training, knowing what you're seeing when you see it, catching it in the first place. So our role under Section 18 of the Community Care and Assisted Living Act and 4.1 of the Hospital Act is if we are asked to give written consent to a gift, persons can give notice to us. We will do a review. We start from the presumption that it's invalid. We don't start from the other side. Some people have questioned that, saying that you should respect the adult's capable wishes, but we start from the presumption, that's why the Act set it up that way, that it's like that we're starting from invalid and you have to convince us that it's valid. And interestingly, we've received very, very few of these requests. Any that I'm aware of over the last 18 years have been attached to a bequest in a will. And maybe we get one every couple, 2-3 years. Very, very few. Certainly we've not got any for inter vivos gifts right in the moment. We also can be involved if it's our own clients. In fact, that's how I've come to know most of the scenarios, is either through someone being referred to our office and maybe gifting was all part of the original presenting problem, or our own clients are wanting to do a will and we find out that they're wanting to leave bequests to service providers, and then we do a follow-up and a review and everything else. And from the perspective of wanting to honor our clients' wishes, but wanting to also check and make sure there's nothing that's gone a little sideways, inappropriate, and building the evidence, if you will, for an approval later down the road, or if in fact the client, if we're told that the facility wouldn't have allowed that person to take that gift anyway, then we might go back to the client and say, is there anything else that you wish to do, because this person won't be allowed to accept this anyway, that type of thing. It's interesting how often this happens. So I worry that it is the tip of the iceberg. And why do I worry? And the scenarios that have come to my attention, I think what's alarming to me is the fact that so many people didn't even know the law existed, didn't think there was anything wrong, and that there's this sense of almost overemphasis on supporting the residents' rights and choices to the extent that it's almost clouding the conflict of interest for the individual who's receiving it. So we've seen that the vulnerable, capable adult, the higher functioning, is the one most at risk, the one that's more active, more able to maybe give gifts. We know that many of our clients have a history of liking to give gifts, participating in that. How do you redirect or respect what they're wanting, get to the heart of what they might be trying to do through the gift, and respect that while still sort of preventing your staff from being in that conflict or even a perception that they might be doing something inappropriate. We see that, well, at least I've seen, that the clients with the fewest family are where we see these scenarios coming up. And that might be that you've got individuals out there that are just befriending and starting some sort of relationship that the adult's really relying on. But we've also seen the situations where it looks like straight out predator. There's also limits, as I mentioned earlier, on what the Act can do when the staff member or volunteer just resigns, and we've seen that scenario as well, or when pursuing a gift that's been given is too costly. It costs more than the actual gift if you went back through court, and it takes somebody to actually object and chase it. The referrals to our office aren't for that purpose, they're just for approving the gift. So some of the examples that have come to my attention over the years, there was one of an elderly gentleman, I think he was 91 or 92, and he just recently received an inheritance of about $2 million. He hadn't had a lot of money prior to that. He'd been in this care facility. At the time, I don't believe it was covered under the Community Care Facility Act. I can't remember why, but he befriended, or they befriended him, a volunteer and an employee of the facility. I believe, in fact, it was this whole gifting that ended up having the situation referred to our office. He bought them both high-end vehicles, and they then resigned from the facility, so they had no recourse through the facility to do anything. When it came to our attention, this was some months or maybe a year later, the value of trying to go after those vehicles would have been not worth the cost of pursuing. And in addition to that, when we talk about benefit, the husband of the employee was the fellow who ran the car dealership and also got the commission from the sales of the vehicles. So that was one that we were just stuck staring at it with nothing that we could do about it. And the facility basically was saying that given that they weren't their employees anymore, there was nothing more they could do about it either. Somehow it seems like there should be something more that can be done about those scenarios. Then we had another one. It was quite egregious. It started off quite benign. One of my staff just told me in passing that one of their clients had left a gift to a member in an employee in the facility they were in, and this was back before hospital facilities were under this act. And it was a will that we actually helped the client draft. We got her a lawyer, and she wrote this will up, and the lawyer was actually defending her wishes. This is what she wanted. We were concerned and asked the facility to just check out and make sure it looked all okay. Initially, it was like, well, if this is the client's wishes, then so be it. Then I think some gossip started. Really, I think that's what happened, is some gossip was starting in the facility, and they decided to do a more thorough review. And what they came up with was really quite amazing. And we included a lot of this information in lobbying back with the Ministry of Health about including hospital facilities under the Act for whatever extra benefit that would do. But what we found, or not we, what the facility found when they did their investigation is in a basket beside this woman's bed, this was our client, she didn't have a family, she did have money, was a photocopy of her will with things scratched out and new things added in, new numbers, and for benefits to different individuals at different amounts and in different people's handwriting, not just one. Little notes saying you're just like grandma to, so-and-so misses you, lots of sort of cajoling, friendly relationship stuff, where this one employee was saying that this person was like a grandma to her grandkids and that kind of thing, which, on one end could sound sort of nice, but once you start seeing the photocopies of the will and the scratched out numbers and all, your sense of, maybe there's another side to the story. We've definitely heard just through the grapevine of gifts of personal items and little jewelry and that kind of thing. And admittedly, I can see that policy is all that you can use to cover these small items of very little value. But again, I'd be very careful. The history of my working in the office tells me that I can manage property and investments beautifully, but lose grandma's teacup, and we are going to be in the news for the next 5 years. So, little tokens that seem like they have no value, I'd be very cautious about. The one situation that came up, they said we had the charge nurse's approval. I'm going, okay, well, is that good enough with a scenario that's looking a little bit worrisome? I had one that was a call directly to me. It was a complaint from a care facility administrator who, again, was taking that very principled approach of wanting to support the residents' rights to make choices. But in this case, the choice was to buy a very expensive watch, not a Timex, a very expensive watch for one of the service providers. And this client did not have a lot of money and had a history of trying to sort of buy friends' influence and then being very angry that people weren't giving her the friendship that she thought she should have. So that one was quite a surprise to me, that it was not just a frontline worker perhaps not knowing that this legislation was out there, but in fact, and for all the right reasons, but thinking that it would be okay to buy expensive pieces of jewelry. And then we had another one where the client, almost about the time of our getting involved, that was probably the referral, got befriended by the cook in this care facility. And she was much, much younger than him, and she moved him out and into her own home with the idea that he would now help her start like a little restaurant or a little business. The referral to us probably was due to the alarm of the facility and seeing this happen. We couldn't stop the living relationship as long as that's what he was choosing, but we were able to at least have some control over how his funds would be spent. I believe he went into facility back again after a little while. So these are just some of the scenarios that I've seen, enough to make me think that there's probably more lurking, and like so many things, you can't deal with things that you don't see. So if it's hidden and all, anything that's hidden is going to be hard to find. I should point out that recent changes in the Power of Attorney Act also prevent a power of attorney from gifting unless it's within certain ranges. And if someone's being supported by a representative, a Rep 7 for finances, they are prohibited from gifting at all. So just because it's done through someone else, they may actually be barred as well for doing gifts. So our recommendation is that at least assisted living should be included in the gifting restrictions. Might be better to have a little more of a definition around what is a gift, the gift that requires written consent, that kind of thing, because I do think that people should be able to buy a box of chocolates or little things and feel part of that relationship. It'd be nice to see the gifting restrictions on all care facilities, mental health, even the ones in the community. And of course, more enhanced and consistent training around gifting. What is it? What to tell people? I know that all the facilities have policy, and yet still these scenarios happen. And how do we chase people when they just decide to leave the employer-employee relationship and there's no teeth left? I'm wondering about the caregiver registration and whether employers can be a little more proactive in making sure those names get forwarded when there's concerns. That's it.
So I've been asked to talk about theft. So can I see a raise of hands of how many people in this room have ever had something stolen from them? So it's the vast majority of you at some point had something stolen from you. How did you feel when it was stolen? Annoyed? Sorry? Violated. Any other words come to mind? Any emotions? Angry? So you can imagine my emotions this morning when I was riding the Canada line, and Brian, who in high school at the end of grade 12 stole something from me, and he ended up sitting next to me on the Canada line. And I told him what I was doing this morning and what I was speaking on. And
grudges along, do you?
Sorry?
Carry grudges?
No. And he now is an investment advisor of a large financial firm downtown. So, and this, imagine the scenario, the exact same scenario, but imagine it's a senior in a care facility, and all of her possessions, all her worldly possessions now that she's allowed to have, are in her room, and one of those sentimental items, probably of not much value to her, but obviously to the person that took it from her, is now gone, and her room now, or her world, is shattered. She feels all the same ways that you felt when things were stolen from you, and that's why this is such a serious topic. And so I do want to read an email I received earlier in the year about theft, and I'm going to read it out, and I'll tell you who it's from. It's from someone in this room. I still remember my mother's distress when, having bought new underwear for my dad, she found it gone the next week and was told by the nursing staff that she must have forgotten when she bought it. She was very much cognitively with it and showed them the credit card bill, which hadn't yet been paid. When she asked again a few days later, her credibility was again questioned. On another occasion, she was cavalierly told, quote, one of the other residents must have taken them. On another occasion, when a nice sweater went missing, it was blamed on the laundry and must have been mislabeled. Neither was possible since she washed her garments at home. And that's from Dr. Gloria Gutman. That was your experience. Gloria's email goes on to say, this is what I want you to talk about at the conference. Frequency of theft in long-term care facilities, who the thieves are. Is it really mainly other residents? As only Gloria can say, I don't think so. How, as an administrator, do you get the message to staff that theft is unacceptable? What do you do to prevent it? How do you report that theft has occurred, and how do you record it, and who deals with the report? So I'll try to do those in the next 12 minutes or so. So we're talking about things like missing clothing. We're talking about, you've heard them in the media, reports of rings being pulled off of resident fingers. We're talking about stolen electronic items, lost dentures, eyeglasses, hearing aids. And unfortunately, these stories are all too common. And the frequency is too much. And the impact is on the psychological well-being of the person whose item was stolen. And if in the case of something like lost dentures, it's not just their psychological well-being, it's their health, because it impacts their ability to eat. So my belief is that theft in institutions is unreported, that there's more occurrencing going on. We're not getting all the reports of it happening for lots of different reasons, which we'll get into. And so it is critically important that the institution uphold this principle. It is one of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal. We should be holding that very proudly and protecting the items that belong to the seniors who live there. And I think as a facility, we should be able to stand behind the security in the facility and say that anything that is stolen, we will be comfortable reimbursing the cost to the person. So we should be that comfortable knowing that we'll put that ahead of us. So I want to give 4 different scenarios that happen in theft in institutions. The first is staff to residents. And so here's an example. The Houston Chronicle recently reported early in the year of a 34-year-old staff member, and she had stolen from a resident. How she was caught was the family members were suspicious of things going missing from mom. So what they did, and we certainly don't condone this on either side, but the family member put in, without the administrators being aware, put in a video camera into the room, and they recorded this staff member stealing $60 from a wallet. So it's very severe, and the administrator of the facility called the authorities, and this person was escorted out of the building wearing handcuffs. And you can see her mugshot online if you look. Another example, if you go online looking at media reports of theft in nursing homes, you'll see reports of somebody who has control of the resident trust accounts. For those of you who don't know, residents have a trust account that the facility administers for incidentals that they might be charged during the month. And it's not that hard to skim money from a trust account and put it aside. Through an audit, every year facilities are audited, licensing audits facilities, and also the auditors do, and they were able to find this, and the person was incarcerated as a result. So generally what happens is there are severe cases. There's also the case of a staff member thinking the money left behind on a resident's table is a tip. It does happen. You may have heard of it. And essentially the person thinks that the items in the room are more valuable to them than to the resident who has dementia. How could they possibly use that item? So another example is the staff stealing from the nursing home. So if you're stealing from a nursing home, the reason why it's wrong, theft is wrong anyway, but one of the reasons why it's wrong is because the money that they're stealing could be going to resident programs and services. And even though it might be administrative costs, still at the end of the year, towards the end of the year, we look at how the budget's doing, and then we might be able to increase services. So if they steal from the facility, it has a big impact. And there are examples I've had to administer, but it's generally somebody who has access to purchasing or to supplies is able to take things out of the facility building and then resell them or use them for personal use. So, and it's very unfortunate. In the same case, we handle this with disciplinary action. The other is resident to resident. This is a resident who has sticky fingers. We know that a lot of times residents can wander from room to room and they will take something that they believe is theirs. So a great story happened one time. A resident who I developed a friendship with came to my office and saw a new picture of my wife and our kids, and she thought it was a delightful picture, and she asked if she could have it. So I couldn't say no. So it took her about 10 minutes to get back to her room, and I know this because in those 10 minutes I had 3 phone calls from 3 staff members saying that Maria had stolen my family photo. I said, don't worry, Maria had permission. In this case, she wasn't stealing. So another example, and we just heard about this example, is from family members to a senior. And I'll relate a wonderful story of a very concerned nephew about his aunt. It wasn't his aunt, it was his aunt. Aunt is her trust account, and he was dealing with committeeship and guardianship, and already I knew there were some concerns because there were some the family members not getting along. And he came to see me, and he was wondering why his aunt why her trust account was going down faster than he would have expected, and he was having to replenish it too often. I said, what is your concern? He says, well, what are the transactions going through the account that you are wondering about? And his case was that his aunt was having her hair done once a week. And I said, what's the problem with that? Well, before she had dementia, before she moved in here, she only had it done once a month. I said, so what's your concern about your aunt looking lovely? She looks great. And that was the end of the conversation, and he never came to see me again. So I believe he was worried about his inheritance. So that's another case. My sense is from this topic is that there's a lot written in the media about this. This is the kind of thing that gets attention in the media. It's the kind of thing that you might talk about with other people. It's not something that is a really interesting topic to study in gerontology, but I would certainly encourage more conversation about this and more research. In case you're wondering, this is, I don't believe, a peer-reviewed study, but something online. If you type in this topic, you'll find studies about this. One example was in the States, 47 nursing homes were surveyed, and about a quarter of the people surveyed reported theft. And a small minority of employees will admit to having stolen something themselves, and about 1/5 of family members believe something of their family's possession has been stolen. So I want to just touch on a little bit of the solutions. And the biggest issue with theft in nursing homes or residential care facilities or assisted living is that it's really a vulgar paradox. The vulgar paradox is that the very person that should be caring for mom is the person that is stealing from her. So how do we mitigate and prevent theft? What are the best practices? So the main way is to keep the valuables out of the facility. It's difficult to say this to a senior, but anything that they really want to make sure isn't stolen, they shouldn't bring into the facility. There's no guarantees in a current living environment of things not going missing. And perhaps only keep sentimental items, or even keep copies. Maybe have cosmetic jewelry instead of valuable jewelry. At the time of admission, and I know there's some people whose job it is to do this in this room, the social workers, the people doing the admission, they will have a very upfront conversation about the risk of theft. And they encourage people to document any items they're bringing in of value, and they ensure people know that there is a locked drawer in their room should they wish to keep any valuables safe in their resident room. One facility I worked at, the resident had an Emily Carr painting in the room, and I didn't believe it. I had to go see it for myself. And it was a gorgeous Emily Carr painting, and luckily nobody really knew who Emily Carr was, and nobody touched the painting. And I believe when the resident passed away, it went to the rightful people. So I'll just mention a few of the things. Residents have the right to an environment that is safe for their possessions. Facilities should have a zero tolerance for theft, period, of any kind. It is, I think, one of the most troubling kinds of elder abuse that exists, theft. And one of the things that we do is we do criminal records checks. That was a great initiative of the government of BC to insist on criminal records checks for any employees that we hire, and everyone does have them. So a few more points around this are facilities should be tracking lost and missing items. So we should have very detailed processes for making sure items don't go missing. And some states and some provinces will have very strict regulations around that. Improved security is vital. It shouldn't be easy at all for people to steal. It should be very difficult. There should be education and training of staff around what the policies are and what our principles are. If our mission is to enhance the quality of life of seniors, this would really be the antithesis of that. And then lastly, I'll mention that facilities should be very actively involved in preventing theft, and that would include working with the family council, the resident council, staff meetings, the leadership committee, and is talking about topics, all the taboo topics today, but including theft. And I'll just conclude by saying that the accreditation and licensing both emphasize safety. That really is the key message, and to create a safe environment is to create a theft-free environment. Thank you.
Dan and Kimberly have covered off a lot of different kinds of issues, and I'm just sort of scooping up the crumbs at the end. I think for me, I always need to sort of go back to some starting points and thinking about what is it that we actually mean in terms of financial abuse, financial neglect, financial exploitation. One of the things that I see, sort of looking back over the past couple of decades, is sometimes we run into a tendency to kind of expand our definitions and of abuse in this area. Not everything that is financially harmful or that is going to diminish a person's resources is necessarily abuse. But at the same time, how do we capture, some of the structural issues that happen within different kinds of settings to have a full and better understanding of the reasons why these different kinds of situations might crop up. I think the other thing to be thinking about, again, from a broad kind of perspective, is what is special about financial abuse, financial neglect within the residential care setting? Like, what is special about the dynamics within the circumstances? And some of the things that are very special is just sort of the wide variety of people who are potentially involved. Kimberly has talked in terms of staff. Dan has talked in terms of staff and family members, volunteers. There's a whole variety of different people who circulate within the environment. So sometimes we're going to see some very similar kinds of issues popping up, but there's also going to be some important differences as well. So what are the specifics in terms of the conditions or the circumstances for the individuals, for the residents who are living there, and where is the voice of the residents in how we approach the issues? One of the big challenges that I find in the area, just sort of generally around abuse and neglect, is that sometimes we're so focused in terms of finding an answer to a particular kind of a problem that we're not sort of looking at it more broadly and asking what principles are we actually bringing to the issue, and what are the values that we see as important here. So quite often we see a strong emphasis in terms of safety and security for the individual, but as Kimberly was pointing out, is that within a lot of the facilities, they're really focusing, really trying to understand what is it that the resident, the individual, the person would like to have in the circumstances. Financial abuse broadly, in terms of long-term care settings, was probably one of the first things that really came to the fore back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when academics were first doing research up on Simon Fraser on the mountain. And when they were looking at financial abuse, one of the things that they're quite surprised to see is that most of the cases that were coming to the attention, for example, public guardian and trustee, were actually from the care facility operators. And that it was kinds of situations in which they weren't being paid, and they were saying, there's something amiss here. Now, I remember sort of the academic reaction was at the time, well, they're only acting in their own self-interest. Well, yes, they are acting in their business interest, but they're also acting out of concern for the resident, and really trying to achieve a balance there. Some of the other kinds of things is that when we look at sort of the nature of residential care facilities, we see a whole variety of factors that kind of come together that make it more, make it possible for financially exploitive or manipulative types of situations, to arise. It still tends to be a relatively isolated kind of environment. We make efforts to sort of, have it more community involvement, but it's not not a destination kind of place. The dependency, the physical dependency on individuals, to give you good care, to give you assistance on a day-to-day basis, and the fact that there is a relationship, with the various care aides within the facility. The other thing is in terms of how we actually approach the issues more generally. Let's say that problems arise in the context of family or friends, where people come when they know that somebody has money, and they're importuning the individual, the resident, for money and things along that line. How do we actually approach those kinds of matters in a way that helps to maintain the relationship, if that's what the resident wants, but at the same time offers some safeguards? One of the challenges, one of the mechanisms, and I think it's a bit of an unfortunate mechanism, is that if the director or if the staff don't happen to like the particular visitor, the family member, the friend, or whatever, there will be strong efforts to basically try to ban them from visiting and actually treat it as sort of as a trespass, kind of situation. So sometimes we tend to we show more willingness to bend over backwards for people that we like, and for people that we don't like, because of their socioeconomic background or their cultural background, or a whole variety of different kinds of things. So that really affect sort of the approach that we take to the issues. other thing is that in the context of residential care facilities is the potential, as Dan was mentioning, for to want to have control over the person's finances really quite significantly, and towards an undue degree. So this is the kinds of situations where people will see financial neglect occurring, where there isn't a willingness to pay for the dentures. Well, she's 86 years old. Why does she need new dentures? Or the eyeglasses? Or if you'll have family members who, at a funeral, will be talking about, what a waste of money. We got new eyeglasses for just 3 months ago. Like, what are we going to do with it? So there's this, in part, it's that sense of entitlement, but part of it's kind of an ageism kind of thing, and part of it's just not understanding how important those things that support the individual as a person, to be able to see, to be able to hear, to be able to interact with people, to be able to give, to be able to, and to not be always on the receiving end.
But not too much giving.
But not too much giving. That's right. But not too much giving. So it is a very complex balancing act in this area, and one that I think, quite honestly, we strive really, really hard to kind of figure our way through the systems. I think one of the things, and this is just sort of like a little kind of a cautionary tale, and it has to do with what is our role, and why are we involved. It's not talking about sort of a problem within a residential care facility, but actually in a hospital. It's a court case that came up in North Vancouver, went to the Court of Appeal. And what it was is an older gentleman who used to walk, was a widower, used to walk around Stanley Park seawall, and he met a young woman. She was about 20 years younger than and she had her own business, and they struck up a relationship, and they both seemed quite pleased with it, and it went on for an extended period of time. His family was not very impressed by it. Because she was Oriental and they were not, and so they were quite dismayed, to find out that she had moved into their dad's house, that she brought in her Oriental furniture into the house, and they had a relationship for probably, I think, about five years, and during that which time he developed cancer, and she was his caregiver. Family described her as kind of saw her as the housekeeper. Eventually, he ended up needing to go to the hospital, and while he was in the hospital, one of the nurses took it upon herself to tell him that she thought that he should break off the relationship with this woman. And what actually happened was he actually did end up breaking off his relationship with the woman. When he leaves the and the woman is upset, and she tries to find what her legal rights are in this relationship. But what happens is when he goes back home, there isn't anybody to care for him. The family hire. It's not that the family decide that they're going to give care to him. What they do is they hire somebody to take care of him for his last days. For me, it's a cautionary tale, because within the area of abuse and neglect, we talk about within the healthcare providers to have a high index of suspicion. Don't trust relationships. Don't trust relationships with where there's strangers or not, with not family members involved and stuff along that line. Or we get people sort of looking at making judgment calls about relationships where we often only have part of the information, and jumping to conclusions. So if my broad approach to, and I hope that you will take this into your own practice, is really being mindful. What is our responsibility to individuals, and really having a good, strong rationale for why we act the way that we do. What are the values that we bring to it? What are the principles that we bring to it? And hopefully through that process to come up with some reasonably satisfactory approaches that are respectful from the perspective of the residents, that are supportive of the staff, are supportive of family, and basically take a whole person and a whole care kind of approach. Thanks.
Great, thanks a lot, panel. So we have about 25 minutes, so comments and questions for any of the panelists. And please do use the microphone so that it'll be able to be recorded for posting on the website.
I'll keep everyone in their seats.
Sorry, rather than making my way to the microphone, I'll be quite loud. I was interested, sir, in your comment about that we could find some information online. Is there an online registry of long-term care staff who have been convicted of crimes against children? And if so, that would be great. If you could tell us what where that is.
So we do want to make sure people can hear all the questions. So the question was, is there a caregiver registry and how does it work, I think is basically the question.
No, actually I said registry of long-term care staff convicted of...
Okay. Registry of long-term care staff who have been convicted. Does anyone know the answer to that question?
Sue does.
Hi there, I'm Sue Bedford. I'm with Community Care Facilities Licensing, Ministry of Health. No, there is no registry of long-term care aides that have been convicted. There is a care aid registry of BC which service providers can log on to when they are hiring staff, but there is no public registry.
I'm just curious because you said we could go online and see the mug shot, so I wondered
okay.
what you meant by that.
Right. So I was referring to there actually is. I found out recently in preparing for today. I found out there is a website called mugshot.com, and you can see the happy, smiling, unsmiling faces of people who have had their mugshots taken for being arrested.
All right, thanks. And this was at your facility, was it?
No. It was the one I was citing.
We know where we would find that particular mugshot. I'm just wondering if this is a legitimate thing or just an example that you made up.
No, I didn't make the example. The example was cited in the Houston Chronicle, and I did further research to confirm it. There is a case of this lady being convicted for theft. It was $60, and it was videotaped. But there's the care aid registry that only carries. It doesn't cover other people in facilities. That does list people who no longer are suitable to be care aides or warns. The other thing that we do is criminal records checks. Those are the two main ways that we can help to prevent people from working with seniors who would like to steal from them.
Okay, so this is a U.S.-based situation, not in Canada, that we can find. Okay, thanks.
Good morning still. My name's Miriam Larson. I'm a gerontologist, SFU, PVD, working in community. I'm curious if there's any data about rates of theft. Dan spoke about, most of us raised our hands that we've been victims of theft. Is the proportion or percentage different in hospital, in residential care, as opposed to a dorm setting or a school? Does anybody know that?
I certainly haven't seen any comparisons or statistics or things along that line. I think what we've identified are a number of things that make it possible to happen within a residential care facility. I mean, the fact that there are so many different types of people, people who are in different kinds of roles who are circulating there. The residents who will have may have even if they see something happen, may have difficulty identifying, who they think it was that did it. There are issues in terms of the perceived reliability and the actual reliability of the person in the circumstances. It's some of those kinds of characteristics for the individual, but at the same time, let's not say, paint sort of residential care facilities as these horrible places where there is no trust, and that you don't dare put down something for 5 seconds. A lot of this really reflects what is the nature of the particular facility. Is there trust among the staff? Is there a sense of a responsibility to the residents? Is there a sense of pride, of ownership, of pride of care? But also economic issues in terms of, if you're a casual staff member, you're only there one shift a week, things along that line. All those kinds of factors have a big influence in terms of the likelihood of problems developing. If you don't see yourself as having any kind of relationship or responsibility to the individual residents, if you tend to see them as objects, it becomes easier to justify your behaviors, and to take the whatever it is that that is taken, the clothing, the little special object things, things along that line. We certainly see that the same issues in facilities, for people with disabilities, and again, the extent to which you don't see the person. And you don't see it as really as being that bad. It becomes easier in those kinds of circumstances to rationalize the behavior. So part of our approaches, to this are multifaceted. Ways where we support seeing people as people, seeing the residents as people, but also. Respecting staff as individuals, as honorable individuals as well, and a system of and respecting a system of honor within the facility, plus having some structural things like rules that say, this is appropriate, this is not appropriate in terms of gifts, and being able to sort of negotiate that and work our way through. Silence.
Hi, I'm Karen Christensen. I'm a psychologist. I work with Providence Healthcare and a few residences and also geriatric psychiatry. And I'm just wondering, to prevent theft, acute hospitals as well as residences are open door places all day long where people can just walk in. Should residences be doing more in terms of having guests sign in, monitoring who's coming and going? Anyone can walk in, take the elevator, and go up and visit often cognitively impaired older people. Just wondering what you think about that.
So you raise an important point. So one of the things that we do, if you just look at just from the way of getting in the facility, sometimes facilities will have a keypad, and you have to know the numeric password to get into the facility. Not all facilities, but some do, and depending on the hour of day that you're going, at night they may be on it, during the day they may not. Facilities will often have video cameras at the entrances and the exits of the facility. As well, as you mentioned, they have a sign in and sign out for visitors. And then I was just checking earlier this morning with an administrative colleague in the back of the room, and we were just talking about residents' rooms. So if a resident has the cognitive ability to lock their room and maintain their key, they lock their room. And as I mentioned earlier, they have a bedside table with a key and a lock. If they're cognitively impaired and not able to manage their own door, then it's up to the staff to make sure that their room is protected in some way. So those are some of the general areas, and of course, as Charmaine was mentioning, a very sound policy procedure around theft and missing items. And I agree with Charmaine, this is not a topic that is on the front and center of every day's agenda at most facilities, because it is something that, although the prevalence of it may happen, it's not something that is always happening to the extent that you have to be purchasing new video cameras and new locks and keys.
And I think again, some of the things for us to be mindful of is, the efforts that we take on kind of after the fact, and the efforts that we take on the prevention side, and how we balance our need for that sort of those security issues and things along that line, but also in a way that is respectful of the fact that this is a person's home and this is a person's workplace. So we're constantly sort of working through that, negotiating that, and trying to balance these different, very, very these important differences in the approaches that we try to take, in terms of of what makes sense and in terms of the issues.
Thank you very much. My name is Johanna Trimble. I'm with the Patient Voices Network. And I just wanted to talk about something that I think is a larger issue for the system and maybe our culture. And that is that people in residential care are, if they don't have family or friends who visit, or they're so old that their family or friends have all died, then they're very, very vulnerable. And people who are kind to them may actually be offered gifts, and we've discussed that to some degree. So I think that, it speaks somewhat to the idea of what kind of social life or what kind of activities are offered to people so they can have less of a feeling of isolation and loneliness that they may want to address by trying to give somebody something so they can have more attention, which we all want as human beings. And as an illustration, I had a very, very elderly uncle who is in his late 90s, but still living on his own and cognitively completely there. And he developed a friendship with one of the home care people that had cared for his wife before she died. So he was a caregiver for his wife in his 90s and was helped by the home care system in Alberta. After his wife died, he kept in contact with this home care person. And eventually, he actually bought a house for this person. Our family was horrified. Most of his family was in Vancouver. And we really didn't know what to do about this. And part of this was his loneliness. She had said that, and I don't even know if she solicited this gift. I think he probably offered it and she accepted. And the conditions were that he would be able to have a room and that he would have his meals, and that I think his expectation was that he would kind of be the hub of that household. He really wanted that. He was very lonely. And what happened is that once he moved in and had bought the house for this woman, he was pretty much ignored. And eventually, in fact, left and moved back to Vancouver where the rest of his family is. So, just to illustrate that it's sometimes not people inducing gifts. Sometimes there's just a desire to have more contact. And it's very hard sometimes for the family to deal with these kinds of situations.
You raise a really, really good point there. It's, again, in terms of respecting sort of boundaries between, us as adult children and our parents, and then what's respectful in terms of that relationship, without again coming across as sort of the mercenaries, who are always asking, about finances and everything all along the line, because what happens is you end up looking as if you're the one that's always interested in the money and the inheritance. Interestingly, BC Law Institute, one of the very first projects that they did around financial issues for older adults actually had to do with those care kinds of agreements where you're exchanging, like buying a house, or with a kind of like a promise to care, and sort of really looking at some of the kinds of things that people need to be sort of thinking about as they go into that. Most time people don't sign any kinds of agreements or anything along that line. It's a nature of our relationships with each other. Most of our stuff is not down on paper about what our expectations are, and as you pointed out, that they're very nuanced. In terms of the expectations, and really wanting to be part of a family, like and how you actually sort of capture that. I think one of the things that really strive, or we kind of struggle with, is understanding sort of what it is that the person would like to see happen, and finding a fair way of approaching that. So a lot of the financial abuse, types of situations will be where somebody's buying a car for some, so that Johnny can drive me around. And so, are there other kinds of ways of approaching that? That being able to go out someplace with Johnny, without necessarily, buying a new car, in some and ways of being able to to do that. Kimberly,
I think people
what are
want,
some? Yeah.
I mean, the challenging ones are the scenarios like the straight out predator is more black and white, and if you can find it, they're easier to deal with. It's that middle of the road where a relationship has started to develop, and the adult wants to be more of a benefactor, that maybe they don't have anyone else to give their money to. They want to help now in the moment. They want to help send that person's kids off to university. The person receiving starts to get this slight sense of entitlement. You see it, whether it's care providers or family, you see this sort of thing happening, and it starts little, it starts to creep up, and first they're just paying for gas because you drive in the car, and the next it's the insurance, and the next it's the new car. It's a real slippery slope. It's difficult. I'm not saying there's an easy way to analyze it. All I can say that's clear is if you are a service provider in any shape or fashion, you're in a conflict of interest when gifts start coming up. And then how do we address that? We've got a little bit of law for some situations, we've got policy for others, and we've got gaps in between. And the trouble is we've got more and more people with high wealth, properties particularly in BC, and even I'm finding people with very little are being targeted with other people with very little. So it's not always the big bucks that are being chased, but I'd say in the care facility situation, if you've got someone that doesn't have a lot of involved family and yet they've got money, maybe there's one distant family member who's power of attorney that's kind of paying the bills but way from a distance, that'd be the one that I'd be watching if they start to seem to be getting, some new friend, that kind of thing. You'd like to know that there was some companion services going on, something that maintain the activities and that sense of participation, so they don't have this overwhelming sense of gratitude to one individual.
So, four thoughts about responding to the question. One is looking overall about the trust that the institution, the facility, is presenting to the community, and I would really look closely at the mission, vision, and values of the organization, making sure that inherent in the values are the kinds of principles that are important to you. And then, so some examples, and Liz was mentioning this morning about the Eden Alternative, and Dr. Bill Thomas, when he talks about activities, he'll talk about how many times during the year does the resident leave the facility for a reason other than an appointment. So if they have an active bus outing program, that's a really good good criteria of how they value seniors. And another example would be, as was just mentioned, gifts should have no influence on the status of a family member or status of a resident. So if a family is giving money as a donation to the facility or is somehow more involved, that shouldn't garner them more attention and care. So friendships that do relate to a gift, if that gift is received and is not illegal, that it is a conflict of interest, and the employee would have to terminate their employment with the organization. There's no way around it to receive a gift. And then lastly, around volunteering or companionship, or just generally, what is the organization's viewpoint on this? What do they think a visitation program should look like? Do they have a goal, for example, like everyone should have a one-to-one visitor, especially for those residents that were mentioned earlier that don't have families involved? What's their policy around and their practice around end-of-life care? Do they want to make sure that no one dies alone? Do they want to make sure that there's always a volunteer or a palliative care program so that people are well cared for at the end of life? So, and is there a chaplaincy program? Those are the kinds of things I would look at and then probably make my judgment call based on that. But I think there could be some vulnerability with somebody who doesn't have family members or close friends involved.
Hi, I'm just wondering if a lot of this doesn't come down to capacity of the elder. Perhaps the word's been mentioned and I missed it, but you know, it seems like if an elder in a facility wants to give a gift, whether it's small or large, to someone, that then ideally, I know this doesn't always happen, but ideally then there'd be some evaluation of that person's capacity in a mental
I would caution against tying it to capacity. It's vulnerability that
absolutely, that was the other thing I was going to mention.
It's actually the more cognitively intact person, like the one in assisted living, that I worry the most about. They've got more money. They're more fearful of perhaps going into the next staged care facility. They might be wanting to influence and show that they're still capable and able. If they're cognitively impaired, it's actually fairly easy to disallow the gift. They didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
So people that are more able but fearful, lonely, maybe wanting some power, wanting some sense of being part of someone's life, those are the scenarios, and capacity is just another little piece of it.
I think the gray area would be where you'd have to evaluate. I mean, if the person clearly has a known dementia, then that's, like you said, a simpler case. But if they're in the gray area, then that's one of the considerations. And I was for sure going to mention that vulnerability to undue influence and other reasons for being vulnerable would be the other thing to evaluate. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that even if you're focusing specifically in terms of capacity, it's going to depend very, very much on the particular kind of decision that we're talking about, and in terms of sort of whether that answer for capacity, because we tend to sort of think of capacity is like an on-off switch. It's either on or it's off. A lot of the time, it depends so very much in terms of situation, context, relationships, much more than just sort of focusing on as an on-off switch.
Now, we've got lots of clients for whom we're the financial money manager. We're the committee of estate, and they've been declared incapable as per the Patients Property Act, but they're still able to consider, they may still be able to do a will, they may still be able to have the decision making to give a gift, and we would look at every one of those cases individually. I think what you want to do is switch it over and say the recipient, what's their right to accept a gift when they are in a power relationship.
I think we have time for maybe one more comment or question. Right? Any other thoughts or comments? Or are we the only thing standing between you and lunch? Go ahead. Oh, lunch is at the back? Okay. So, So great. Thank you for a very fulsome discussion.